Thank you, David. Hi, how are you, everyone? I'm really excited to be here amongst us geeks. I was discussing earlier that we truly have to be geeks to be sitting in this cold room when we know that outside we have the most beautiful sun I've seen in probably 5 years. I really, I really thank you for being here. My name is Sergio Legorreta. I'm a partner with Baker and McKinsey. I'm based in Mexico City, and my primary practice is helping technology companies become successful. So I stress become successful because I try to see my job as a part of the overall keys for a company to actually achieve its business goals. So not only do I help structure the company and negotiate with venture capital funds, but overall I'm interested in making sure that the companies actually do what they're planning to do. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Juan Vera. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Blue Messaging. Blue Messaging is my third entrepreneurial experience, and it's a B2B company that are participating in the virtual communication space. And in common words, that means that we have a messaging internet platform that has the capacity to chat with people in the same way that they do with friends, using slang, abbreviations, etc. And that means that we can establish a one-to-one dialogue between a machine and a person using artificial intelligence technologies. And we are connecting businesses with people and taking advantage of all the digital channels that converge on the mobile phones. I'm talking about Twitter, Facebook, SMS, email chat, etc. And we started the company in 2010. We have been growing at a good pace, more than 200% per year with positive figures. And we are based in Mexico City. Right now we are expanding the business through Latin America and the US.
Thank you. Alejandro?
Thank you, David. So I'm Alejandro Villalon. I'm involved on the investing side, running an angel investing firm. Before that, I was an intrapreneur. I'll explain that later on. But maybe we will have the chance to chat later.
Yes. Juan Manuel?
I am Juan Manuel Sancho. I'm a partner at González Calvillo. We're a law firm. I have the pleasure of being a friend with Sergio, but he has a special expertise in startups, which I do not, but I advise companies in their development after that more, how do they move forward through corporate governance, through working in teams with advisors, tax, legal, accounting, and building a structure, and then probably exit, probably go through strategic alliances, including then probably divestitures, probably workouts. So it's working with the companies in their legal life and trying to make the lawyer moving from being an evil need to someone to work with. Let's try to do that.
Thank you. Lynn?
Thank you, David. I'm Lynn Hoffman. I'm also a lawyer, but I decided to go through the business world and started with large companies and became CEO of my own development company, and then along the way invested in and became the lead director of a public company on the NASDAQ and had the experience of working with a board, and that led me to my current passion, which is to add value on boards and to help leverage the talents of the management team in partnership with the board.
Great. I'm David Haidt. I was raised in the Silicon Valley in the 60s and the 70s. I've spent the last 20 years living in emerging markets, twice in Asia Pacific and about 15 years in Colombia, Brazil, and Mexico. For the 30 years of my career, I was 23 years with Intel Corporation. I've lived back in Mexico the last 6 years, and for about 3 years now, the CEO of a medical device technology and clinical research company in Mexico City. So this conversation is about frameworks for success. The approach we're going to take is our panelists with the depth of their experience, either as entrepreneurs or from legal and tax side, will present very briefly one of their case studies, and we'll talk about the learnings, and we'll talk about some of the pitfalls and challenges that were addressed through those cases. So Alejandro, if I could ask you to speak about your experiences with Ventikit as an entrepreneur, and maybe a little bit about the story of the company and how it progressed.
Oh, sure. Thank you, David. I prepared some talking points here to be accurate with the time, the small time we have at this panel. Verifone Access, formerly known as Ventikit, after a joint venture agreement with Verifone, that is one of the largest payment industry service provider, is a company listed in New York Stock Exchange. We made a joint venture with them around 2006. Yeah, it was in 2006. That happened when in 2000 we as I say we, because I had at that time a partner, Leonardo Shapiro, who is also an Endeavor entrepreneur. We started a company that the original business was not the one that at the end had the success, if quoted, success, if I can say that. So the original business model underperformed, and that was a very good experience for two of us by learning a lot of things from the market and from the fund raising and etc. And we decided to start over again a new company by taking advantage of certain developments we made at the beginning of the company. The company at the end became the leader in providing services to merchants and acquirers in banking system on the payment industry in Mexico. The original business model was mainly as a website builder when the fever of .com industry in 2000 or something like that. And as I said, it didn't run very well. But we realized that we had a very strong transaction engine behind that. So we started to build a new company that is this called Ventikit by capitalizing on three main competitive advantages we found. One was that we reduced investments from acquirers and banks by providing certain, let's say, dumb terminals linked to a PC instead of the oldest telephone POS terminals. The second one is that we reduced the cost of transaction by using internet protocols instead of telephone lines. And the third one is that we enhanced the services we provided to merchants by adding value-added services like loyalty programs or electronic wallets, etc. Bill payment, receiving bill payments, etc. So by walking in the path, we could serve or serve the market, and we could reach a total of 10 to 15% of the total POS machines in Mexico. And at that time, there were a big Godzilla that appeared on our on our way, and that Godzilla was very fun. So they got in love to a Mexican lizard that was Ventakit. So to make a long story short, we signed a joint venture agreement, and we gave them the option to acquire the majority stake on the company by a pre-established buyout transaction that took place 2 years later. So I just wanted to share with you some learnings about all that. One is that as an entrepreneur, you need to keep the talent of your company motivated and with the capacity to learn from the market if the things are not going very well. The second one is that we, as an entrepreneur, we need to keep innovating on the value added you found at the beginning, and keep innovating and scale the company and scale the business with those advantages. Third, we passed through several funding rounds, angel VCs, private equity, and finally the strategic investor. And it was a real good experience that forced to us a very complex way to transform the company from a very small company to a Sarbanes-Oxley compliant company. The adoption of suitable legal frameworks to assure the investment in the company. We had to transform the legal framework to a SAPI that maybe our lawyers here could explain on that. And we had to incorporate a board with independent board members, etc. So in a glance, this is Ventakit.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps the first interesting question might be for the two lawyers on our panel. Without knowing all the terms and conditions or the specific details, what sort of framework would you advise Alejandro's company to have had in some of these important transitions, moving to a joint venture, moving into becoming Sarbanes-Oxley compliant? What are some things that entrepreneurs need to consider as they go through these transitions? Juan?
Well, I think first thing, it was good to have a SAPI to set the business, and then for special rights, exit strategies, it gives much more flexibility. It was a legal response to a need, and it was good. It allows not to have like old-fashioned provisions of our corporate laws, not making valid some puts, calls, forcing a vote, or not having pro rata distributions. So that was good. I think that then the way agreements were drafted would have been very important in terms of what triggered any exit, what would allow other partners to come in what fashion, with which rights, and then governing vetoes and where you need a board meeting, where you need a shareholders meeting, why, and in the same sense, allowing the company to move forward without just because having too much legal protection, not being able to generate more business and allow the operational staff below to properly keep on going. No? That's a couple of comments I will add there.
Okay. Sergio, anything to add?
Well, yeah, I'll probably touch on some practical points on what I've seen in my experience in Mexico, in particular with Mexican entrepreneurs when they first face a venture capital or an angel investor. And the first one is be prepared. That is, I've seen entrepreneurs walk into rooms with angel investors that have not done their homework. And I really liked the comment earlier in one of the other panels where a recommendation that I believe is probably the best one I've ever heard on creating a relationship with the angel investor before you even meet to discuss business. And this makes all the sense in the world. I mean, who would lend you money or give you money if they don't even know who you are? So before they understand your business, they have to understand who you are. Remember, the first thing you have to sell when you walk in with an angel investor or a venture capital is not your business. You're selling yourself. So be prepared to do that, okay? That's the very first one. The second one, and this refers to a famous song, which really comes from a poem, I believe, and the second will be wear sunscreen. And for those of you who've listened to that song, you might know that that song refers to practical advice in life. And in that sense, my advice would be hire a lawyer, but hire a startup-friendly lawyer, especially if you're a startup. Find your right match. Find a lawyer that will pay enough attention to your business that will help you structure for the stage that you're at. Remember that investors are sentimental. They're human beings just like you are. So don't treat them as an institution and don't be afraid. You have to negotiate things. And remember, the reason you are negotiating is because you want to make a deal that's fair for you, but also fair for the investor. So discuss the thorny details up front. Do not be afraid to discuss the thorny exit. That is what this is about. If you want to sit down and negotiate the easy terms, that's okay, but leave those for the end. Negotiate the thorny issues at the outset. So that's another practical point. And I could, spend hours here talking about some other comments or some other pieces of advice, but another one that I would like to mention before I hand over the discussion is resist the temptation to grant anti-dilution rights and preferred stock very early in the discussions. That is a very common mistake I see done in Mexico, out of lack of knowledge or out of lack of eagerness to get the money. To the extent possible, try to resist the temptation of going that route.
Okay, thank you. Lynn, I'm going to have you make some comments about board governance as we listen to Juan Vera talk a little bit about blue messaging. Juan, if you could speak about blue messaging's evolution over time, how you built a board, how you've worked with your board, and then we'll have some discussion with the panel.
Okay. In terms of the board, I believe we are very lucky because we don't have busy guys in our board right now. We know that we will need it in the near future, but until now we don't. And we have the support of the Endeavors Network. Basically, we have access to a lot of mentors of the network, and we are selecting people that are complementary with our skills. And I believe this is a very important thing because when you are a startup or you are in the first stage of your company, as Blue Messaging does, we have only 3 years in the market, we believe that corporate guys are very useful and valuable, but specialize in some topics, and entrepreneurs that have more experience than you are my favorite. No? And I believe you can build a very good team with different skills, and you have to be aware to select the right people to the right moment of the company, because maybe at the beginning you don't need a big corporate guy. Maybe you need more people that understand the stage where are you running your company. No.
Okay, thank you. Lynn, what would be your views over the approach that Blue Messaging has taken?
Well, first of all, I think governance conjures up government or Robert's Rules of Order or something terribly dreary and boring, and in reality it is the dynamics of power and control, and ultimately, when done well, it's an enormous flywheel for leverage, for working constructively with the talent and the vision of the management team to take a company from good to great. and to help it not only achieve its strategy, but to inflect, to go from and not just ordinary growth, but extraordinary growth and excellence. So I think you're absolutely right. Different stages require different people, and it doesn't have to be a marquee board. The notion used to be we'll talk loudly. Okay. Sitting CEOs with all of their expectations and requirements, leading their own companies, meeting Sarbanes-Oxley and all the other requirements, Dodd-Frank, the highly regulatory responsibilities they have, are not always going to be the best contributors. You do want diversity of competency. And if you think about choosing the competencies of your board, again, from the leverage point of view, what do you have already within the management team? What don't you have? And can you annex that by bringing in people who have skill sets and experience bases that you don't already have within the management team? I think that's a very dynamic way to approach building a board.
Okay, thank you. Alejandro, a question for you with respect to the evolution of the project that you took to the JV and then successful exit. How did you establish a set of values or culture for your initial endeavors, and how did that change over time as you went through the process of maturing the company, going into a JV where you had influence from another company? How did you deal with that as a senior manager?
Well, it was not really easy because there were two different cultures. They were Americans, and we are Mexicans. So at the beginning, that was the first thing. So we have to learn how to deal with that, but most importantly, how to manage an establishment for get agreements to move the company on the path. So we approached two external advisors to the board, and we understood that the board is a partner, not a let's say an enemy. So it helps to keep away the loneliness of the entrepreneur. So when you are starting up, you are so alone, and you feel all, as somebody in the morning said, dealing with emotions. And the board helps to change those emotions to think more clearly to solve every kind of trouble the company is passing through.
Yeah, as the moderator of this panel, I intentionally asked Tim Ferriss the question of his advice on dealing with boards. And I found it interesting that he brought up the topic of read up on how to negotiate. I would suggest it's not the healthiest relationship for a CEO to have with their board, but what's the experience of some of the panelists here?
Well, one of the things I'd like to mention is that often I see more and more boards that, especially board members in particular, some board members that try to take the role of management. And that is often something that I try to remember, or to have entrepreneurs remember, is that your board is not management. They're not supposed to manage your company. They're supposed to advise you. But often that, that line is so thin when the companies are small, because you're all working so much closely together that you don't realize that somebody else making the decisions. So that's one comment I had.
And it's a bit of a conundrum, because you're absolutely right. The board doesn't manage the company, but the board does provide oversight And the board ultimately has the final responsibility. So how do you not get into the detail, into the weeds, into substituting your judgment on an operating level, but still provide the right level of oversight to, particularly in a public company, protect the interest of shareholders and add independence when most boards and companies are riddled with conflicts?
Absolutely, and I think the experience of family companies, which in Mexico is present and all through Latin America and in the world, I think, also imposes the need to put this rule in place. And you have related members, and it's good that you have them, and they are could be linked to the shareholders. You have the independent, but that's how you have a board actually working one side and the other. And it's good how Mexican laws have incorporated our principles from mainly U.S. securities laws. And family companies in Mexico, even when they're not public, they are more and more adopting corporate governance in a fashion like to public companies in Mexico. And that's helping a lot. And that's also helping moving one generation to another and having a management that it's different from the family, and also a board that it's provides that surveillance and that complex role of related members working with independent members through generations in the family.
One of our earlier speakers today used the phrase in his speech, the death of distance. And that really resonated with me, because I believe that as entrepreneurs, we're now participating in the global economy, and that requires us to think globally, act globally, be very effective locally, but really have a mindset that allows us to interact with various cultures, various different management styles. Juan, you mentioned that Blue Messaging is entering into the U.S. market. Earlier in a conversation today, you mentioned your office in New York. What's one thing that, one tool you wish you had, or one thing that you would do differently in your venture into the U.S. market from your learnings?
It's a difficult question because we just started our U.S. strategy just 6 months ago, no? But basically, we defined that we want to test the market before to accelerate, no? And Blue Messaging is in an emerging market. There is a few companies around the world applying artificial intelligence technologies, and we know that this emerging market will be growth very rapid, and in the next 4 or 5 years should be a standard in all corporations to communicate and to contact consumers and clients. No? And we are pursuing to be a leader in this market at that moment, and we believe that if we want to wave the market, the U.S. is the right place to start. No? This is the first. The second is our main goal is to prove that we have a business model complete before to scale and to attract to the company guys than Alejandro. You know? Because we don't want to waste our time and his money. And in the case of the U.S., we started an alliance with Young and Rubicon, the WPP group, and we are working with them into their offices, and we are developing together innovative solutions for the clients. No? And as I mentioned, we have only 6 months of experience in that, but we believe it's very important to test in a real way the market. And if you can prove all your assumptions, and you can deliver a real solution, and you can understand perfectly the market and what part of the cake you can eat and how you will compete, there is a good moment to scale and accelerate the business and to bring the VCs for the company. No? And let me finish my comment that my main recommendation with the VC money is that I realized that the most startups, one of their main goal is we need a VC, we need the investment, okay? I believe it shouldn't be, no? I believe the main goal is that you have to test your own business, your own market, and the money of the VCs should be the last goal. No? In the case that you want to keep the most part of the stocks in the company, you know? In the contrary, you will have to assume the consequences.
Robin, is it time for questions? Questions from the audience?
Hi, I'm Andy from Agave Lab. I've done business, started business on both sides of the border, and I'm wondering, in Mexico, I've been here for 5 years, and I'm not having much luck finding someone that understands the concept of employee stock ownership. I'm wondering if you guys have cracked that nut. Is there a consensus about how to reward employees with a stock option plan, or is each company do you create your own each company, or is there a sort of standard form?
Well, there's a legal regime for public companies, which is usually with the buyback fund that public companies have. Many times it's structured through that fund. Also, the securities laws allow to have it structured separately, but anyway would need to stick to the rules similar to those of the buyback fund. In the sense of regulating how you can offer the shares without it being a public offering, because you can't treat it the same way as the other shares that you have in the public company. If it's a private, if it's a company which does not have its shares traded in the stock exchange, then a typical way is a Mexican trust, which is pretty helpful in the sense of having a title transfer vehicle where you can put back and forth the shares from employees or regulate rights that would grant those shares to employees. And they would have probably, without being shareholders, build up rights that would then end in granting them shares. Also, it could be a separate company where you issue some stock and you have some money flowing from other companies in the structure. But I would say the most typical is a trust, and some other times is simply granting them shares within a program that you have no separate legal structure, but just a document that says what grants you the right to earn shares in certain circumstances. So you have treasury stock, what we call in Mexico acciones en tesorería, that you would be having subscribed by the employees in certain circumstances, or directly issue them and grant them to them without this treasury stage.
I would only quickly add that the mechanism is quite common, I would say, in some areas or some industries. I've certainly seen it. And one area of concern tends to be that stock might be construed as part of a salary for some considerations, and that becomes tricky at the time of termination of employment, for example. So the way you draft and the way you grant the stock options in Mexico has to be careful enough that you make sure that either the options are clear in their vesting or structured in a way that it doesn't really hurt you at the time of exit. We've seen horror stories where badly drafted stock options ended up in a former mid-level employee taking away much more than their actual yearly salary just because of a badly drafted option.
If you'll leave your business card, we can get you your invoice after the meeting. Other questions?
That's a comment about this. You mentioned the compensation. I believe the other point of view is the impact in how effective is these actions to hire people and to attract and retain talent. And I believe there is a cultural issue here, because in our case with our team in the US, there is no problem with our stock option. Everybody understands the program, and everybody is very interested in the stock option program. But In the case of the Latin American, and especially with the Mexican team, we decided to educate our people in entrepreneurship, and we realized that at the beginning there were a few participants in the program, and the culture of the company is gaining traction. And right now everybody is asking for us, hey, can I have actions of the stocks of the company? And how can I access the stock options employee? And I believe it's part of your responsibility, social leader of the company, to create the culture of the entrepreneurship in the company. You know? They are not only employees, they are investors, and they can win more than a salary if they do their work in a good way.